you're never going to get the truth about war or what the government's doing in foreign policy from the establishment media. Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Chris Cuomo, Jonathan Muir, they are never going to give you the truth. Anderson Cooper, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're never going to give you the truth about foreign policy. Of course, that includes the Young Turks, who've been for every bombing campaign since I met Cenk Uygur. So here's a former CIA agent and whistleblower, Philip Agee, outlining why the CIA has to destroy any alternative to capitalism. You ready for this? This is the bad guy telling you the quiet part out loud.
Are successful in their example of being able to provide, as a poor country, the best medical care in the third world to the whole population, because it's an inclusionary system. It's not like we have here, where you have this huge bulk of the population, marginalized. But there, if everybody can have adequate medical care, if the schooling is adequate for all, and remember, Cuba has more doctors and more teachers per capita than any country in the world. And they have succeeded in these areas, and it's all state supported, which means people don't have to put money out for the medical care or for, they of course pay the cost indirectly as a whole society, but they don't have to pay the bill in the hospital and so forth. And so that cannot be allowed to stand. It's a very bad example for the United States. So there's a very large mass of people out there who can look at Cuba and say, well, if they can do it, and on a per capita income of $2,000, $2,500 a year, where ours is $22,500 a year, what's wrong with our system? I mean, maybe we ought to consider an alternative.
That's why Nicaragua, Sandinista in Nicaragua, had to be destroyed.
Exactly. They were a bad example, and that's why Grenada had to be destroyed, because any movement that comes to power with the idea of providing for all the people and of escaping the control of the United States and its economy, let's say the corporations and so forth, then that is bad news here in the United States in the upper circles of power.
So
there you go. So why do we have an embargo forever on Cuba? Why do we do what we did in Nicaragua when I was in college? Why do we do what we did in Haiti? Why are we doing everywhere we in the South America? Why are we doing it? Why, Venezuela? That's why we're doing it, because the capitalists who run our country, because we don't live in a democracy, we live in an oligarchy and a rapacious one. The capitalists who run our country can't allow the example of another country actually providing for its people, because then people in the United States would be like, hey, if they can have everything and they're a poorer country than us, why can't we have it? So they can't have to stop that, and the CIA moves in and, they start guerrilla warfare, start murderous juntas, start killing nuns, whatever it takes. Start torturing people. That's what the CIA does. And they start overthrowing democratically elected governments, like in Venezuela, like they've been trying to do for years. They did it once in Venezuela. So basically what he's saying is we don't want people, the CIA and the establishment, the oligarchs who run this country, don't want people in the United States to think they can have nice things, because then they'll demand them. And then it makes them hard to control. And he's like, so if we allowed these examples of socialism that work in our hemisphere, if we allow them, then people will realize that we live in an awful system. And then they'll have to revolt. And so right now, instead of Bernie Sanders saying you should get in the street and revolt against these motherfuckers, he's telling you these guys are doing great work for you. Instead of the squad saying you should get in the street and revolt right now, you should shut shit down until you get a $15 minimum wage and health care. Shut it down. They're going along and telling you they're making sure you don't realize how awful the system is that you're living under, because this is an awful, oppressive system.
I like how he didn't sugarcoat it one iota either.
No.
I mean, he literally just said, he's like, oh, people providing things for everybody. We can't have that. And he said, that's bad news for the United States. And he didn't even stop there. He went a step further and said, well, the powerful people in the United States, it's bad news for them.
Yes.
It's like, wow.
And so we've also showed you, I wish I had that in here, of how the CIA plants stories and how they co-opt journalists to get them to push propaganda. False stories constantly in the Washington Post, the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN. The Young Turks repeat CIA talking points constantly. Like when they smeared Julian Assange, repeating that bullshit CIA report that we were debunking at the same time. So that's how nefarious the CIA is. And that's why there's unrest. Whenever there's unrest in Central South America, it's because the CIA went in there and did it. Because why? Because, I don't know, somebody like Maduro or Lula might be actually providing for their country. Or the Sandinistas might actually be providing for their country. So it gets worse. Social media is a tool of the CIA. Seriously, this is from CBS News. This is from CBS News. Social media is a tool of the CIA, seriously. But Ashton Kutcher, he says they're cool. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind him scanning my profile if you know what I mean. Come on. Ashton Kutcher, you want to scan my profile, buddy? You want to tap my phone? You want to intercept my communications? You want to store my email? Come on. So, yes, this is from CBS News. You don't need to wear a tinfoil hat to believe that the CIA is using Facebook, Twitter, Google, and other social media to spy on people. That's because the CIA publishes a helpful list of press releases on all the social media ventures it sponsors via its technology investment arm, In-Q-Tel.
They even got a creepy name for you.
Yes.
It's like...
And, you can buy a hat at Walmart, a CIA hat at Walmart for $14, which means you're sponsoring them. That's what that means. The companies that take In-Q-Tel's money aren't shy about publicizing what they're up to either. Most recently, GeoSemble announced an update to its Geo X-ray product, which monitors social media chatter based on location. This capability benefits business users who are monitoring competition, supply chain activity, or business opportunities in a country, neighborhood, or border region. Like capitalism, as long as you can imagine you're the one using the power, you'll agree to it. That's what this is.
That's how they always try to sell it, man. They even try to sell it to the user that way. They're just like, this will help us target better ads for you. Let us know your location. Let this app track you everywhere you go. We'll make better ads for you that way. I don't need your better ads.
People will accept the invasion of their own privacy so long as they can imagine tracking their own audience and reaping the profit from it. That's really true. I just don't... Okay. For government at the city, local, and federal levels, it brings the ability to visualize activity in a given area filtered by topic, time, and location. This is chilling. I find this chilling. We have to find out what the poors are concerned about so we can ignore it later. We can deliver whatever information is available about that place from websites, blogs, tweets, and other social media automatically and accurately. It shouldn't be surprising to learn that the CIA and the world's largest ad agency network, WPP, have been in bed together on a social media data mining venture since January 2009. Holy shit. They've been working together longer than some internet users have been alive. Wow. Wow.
I want to say that's around the time Twitter started, I think.
I think Twitter started in 2008.
I
I'm
think
not
so,
sure.
yeah.
WPP currently owns the world's largest database on individuals, including demographic, financial, purchase, and geographic histories. There is no better diary or form of mind reading. You want to read somebody's mind? You want to read somebody's diary? Look at their personal search history.
Huh.
And the CIA does that.
2006 is when Twitter started.
2006 is when Twitter started.
Oh, really?
WPP's Visible Technologies unit took an investment from In-Q-Tel in fall of 2009. Visible Technologies develops tools that can scan social media networks such as Twitter and Facebook. Google has been a partner with the CIA since 2004, when the company bought Keyhole. Watch your mouth. Google has been partnered with the CIA since 2004, when the company bought Keyhole, a mapping technology business that eventually became Google Earth. So Google's in bed with the CIA since 2004, and you wonder why our Syria coverage gets suppressed? The CIA has been in business with Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post to the tune of $600 million, 3 times what the paper's worth. And you wonder why they do smear pieces on guys like me who tell the truth about the CIA and what they're doing in Syria and Libya and Yemen and Venezuela and Afghanistan and the Sudan and Somalia. You wonder why? Because Google, who owns YouTube, why do they suppress us? Why does the Washington Post have Dave Weigel write smear pieces on us? Why is that? I think because they're working with the CIA. And this is CBS News telling you that. Again, this isn't crazy, kooky nut jobs. It's telling you this is CBS News. That's how fastball down the middle this is. In 2010, Google and In-Q-Tel made a joint investment on a company called Recorded Future, which has the goal of creating a temporal analytics engine that scours the web and creates curves that predict where events may head. Wow. Google is already helping the government write and rewrite history. Here, from its transparency report, are some stats on the amount of information it has either given to the government or wiped from the web based on request by U.S. agencies. So they'll wipe stuff from the web. If the CIA asks Google, wipe this from the web, they'll do it.
Well, and even if they don't wipe it, I mean, they can do things like make sure it doesn't show up until page 7 of the search that someone does, or something like that, like via the analytics and stuff like that.
So it's a big deal. There's alternatives to Google and to Twitter and Facebook. There's alternatives. Just like there's alternatives from flying from LA to New York. You could walk. That's an alternative. 4,601 requests from the United States government agencies for user data. Google complied with government requests for user data 94% of the time.
Wow.
I wonder what was in the 6%.
Government officials.
Yeah, but isn't that isn't that amazing though? That I'm gonna guess the other 6% are people who worked at Google.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, you could do that to them, but not us. Google replied with 94% of government agencies' requests for quote unquote user data. And don't worry, what's the big deal? It's not like anybody's ever Googled anything embarrassing. 1,421 requests for content removal from the CIA or the government asked Google for 1,421 content removals. Google complied with the content removal request 87% of the time. The remaining 13% were all Keith Olbermann. So just so you know, Google is watching you and banishing you. So I don't know if you've seen the updated version of Orwell's 1984. It ends with "You're canceled."
Mark sent you the clip that you wanted.
Oh, okay. So all I want to that's the CIA admitting what they're doing, and now they're spying on you. So now if I try to tell the truth about their dirty wars in South America or whatever they're trying to do in Syria or Libya, Google is in bed with the CIA and they'll suppress us. And that is what's happening. The CEO of YouTube admitted it, that they're suppressing us. In favor of what? In favor of billionaire-owned, CIA-infiltrated corporate news. The CIA used to have to sneak people into the newsroom. Now they get hired as on-air analysts. The head of the CIA is hired as an on-air analyst. You're supposed to hire people to debunk the head of the CIA. You don't bring the CIA on to tell you what's happening. But that's what they do at MSNBC, CNN. That's what they do. And I'm sure Fox. So now you saw that the CIA, why they have to do it, why they have to overthrow democratically elected socialist governments that provide health care to their people. And so now you're going to see how they do it.
Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories.
But you do buy his confidence with true stories?
You buy his confidence and set him up. We've seen this happen recently with Jack Anderson, for example, who has his intelligence sources, and he has also admitted that he's been set up by them. You know, every fifth story just simply being false. You also work on their human vulnerabilities to recruit them in a classic sense, to make them your agent so that you can control what they do, so you don't have to set them up sort of, you know, by putting one over on them. So you can say, here, plant this one next Tuesday.
Can you do this with responsible reporters?
Yes, the Church Committee brought it out in 1975, and then Woodward and Bernstein put an article in Rolling Stone a couple of years later. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press.
Well, give me a concrete example of how you use the press this way, how a false story is planted and how you got it published.
Well, for example, in my war, the Angola War that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times.
So that's how they do it. That's how we get a journalist on our payroll. That's how they do it. And what do? They overthrow democratically elected governments, and they lie to you about it in the press. So, but the CIA is allowed to have a Twitter account and a Facebook page. Their whole thing is professional lying. Their whole thing is professional fake news, but they're allowed to have a Facebook page and a Twitter. So Facebook and Twitter, they're not against lying. They're not against murder. They're not against genocide. They're not against racism. They're not against xenophobia. They're not against the most horrible things in the world, as long as they're being done by the establishment. That's it. And what they're upset is if you tell the truth about that stuff, then they're going to say, oh, like when we told the truth about how the DNC was doing their fuckery with the Iowa primary vote counts. So we covered that, and we told people that the DNC had their fingers in it. Facebook said that was fake news and flagged it. Why? Because we're telling the truth about what's going on. And, of course, it came out later through an investigation that, of course, they were. And the Facebook's never going to go back and correct that. They're never going to say, hey, we got that wrong. We have to apologize to Jimmy Dore. But they've done that to us a couple of times, and they're 100% wrong about it. So you can't. The fact checkers are working for the bad guys. They're not fact checkers. What they are is they're what do you call gatekeepers. And if you have information that's deleterious to the establishment, they deem you fake news, and they suppress you. And why? Because, well, you see why. The CIA runs the media, right? They're in bed. They're whatever they want to do. And the media is owned by 6 people, 6 billionaires, right? 6 companies, a handful of billionaires. And they want you to think that anybody who tells you the truth about Venezuela, or remember Syria, they would call Jimmy Dore. Anybody who told you the truth about Syria is a conspiracy theorist or a Russian. I had people at the Young Turks say that I was a conspiracy theorist because I was telling the truth about Syria. And they're such a shit organization, the Young Turks can't wait to repeat CIA talking points and smear Julian Assange at the same time. I had that happen to me at the Young Turks. I was telling the truth about Syria. We're having Aaron Mate come in. We're repeating Robert Friff's reporting. The Young Turks didn't want to know anything about it. They kept repeating CIA talking points over and over and over and smearing me, literally having people who work for them smear me. That's what the Young Turks are. They are shit libs, CIA repeating bullshit organization. And I had to fucking live with that shit. Hey, everybody, this is the part where I tell you where all our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then this is why I tell you to join our premium program and get extra content, but nobody's got a fucking job. So just enjoy the video.